reasonable rates while building a credible regulatory regime that responds adequately to stakeholders' concerns and also ensures that fairness, transparency, and equity in the provision of utility services throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The RIC also has a statutory mandate to consult with all interested stakeholders in the performance of its functions. Consultation usually yields the best possible regulatory outcomes, and the RIC will work towards ensuring that all stakeholders are afforded the opportunity to express their views and that adequate and accurate information is shared between all stakeholders and the RIC. I would now like to invite our chairman, Mrs. Dawn Callender, to open this afternoon's session. Mrs. Callender.
And my fellow Commissioner T&TEC. Good afternoon all, and thank you for being here. We also have participants who have joined us online, and wherever you are, whether you're in the room in person or whether you're online, we want to give you a very warm welcome. And thank you for assisting us in moving from our draft determination to our final determination. We are aiming now to complete our work within the next 6 weeks or so, and we will continue to have other sessions, and should you have other colleagues who are interested in attending, please encourage them to continue looking at the newspapers, on our websites, our Facebook pages, our Instagram, Twitter, those social media platforms. So I would first of all say that it's very important for us to have these types of consultations to move from our draft determination to the final. We are doing it over a period of 12 weeks, and we have already had approximately 10 of these public consultations, 8 to 10. Overall, we will do 15 in total. The purpose of the consultations, I think, has probably become a little bit skewed because, consultations all over the world, they could be tricky, sometimes people are not engaged and so on. So that's a normal thing. But the purpose of the consultations is really, this is the second stage of us interacting with the public. We've put out a number of papers before we got to the draft determination. When we put out those papers, we expected persons to have comments on them, and we have received some comments. But I think this format gives us a better opportunity to hear comments on the draft determination. We understand that persons sometimes have other issues, and maybe you don't have someone who you think is an official, and therefore they've used these platforms to raise a number of issues about different social grants they've applied for and they didn't receive. But really, we want to direct your attention to what we have in the draft determination. Raise those comments there, allow us to clarify, allow us to change our thinking with respect to the assumptions and so on, how we've used the tools in coming to the draft determination to get us to the final. And the reason I'm taking the time to point this out is that you just heard about the RIC, we are an economic regulator. We're made up of 7 commissioners. I would say that we guard our independence quite fiercely. Some of the powers you may think that we have, in fact, our scope is very limited. Our scope is defined by the RIC Act. You're going to hear a little bit more about the Act in a little while. We do not work for T&TEC. we really have, we have a monitoring responsibility over T&TEC, but we don't work for T&TEC. So some of the questions, we may be able to answer them because of the work we do, but by the same token, there are some questions we can only take a note and pass them on to T&TEC. Our work also is not directed by any government agency. So also in that vein, we can only take your comments, your suggestions concerning taxes, various kinds of subsidies and incentives and so on. We can only take a note and take them back. We do not really comment on political matters. I'm going to come back and give a little bit of guidelines. And when we come to the questions, when we come to the question and answers. Okay? So let's think about the three stakeholders that we interface with. Consumers, persons in this room, whether you're consuming from a residential perspective or from a commercial or from an industrial perspective. We know that consumers want affordable rates and good quality service. The other stakeholder we like to recognize the service provider, T&TEC, and T&TEC would like to collect sufficient rates so that they can earn a fair return. In fact, it's quite marginal return in many ways, but they also want to invest in the technology system and to come up with new technologies to be utilized to provide that service. The third stakeholder is any certain government, because governments provide subsidies, they provide incentives, and when certain requests are made, those must go back to the government so that they can say whether they wish to take up that cost or whether they won't. To the extent that there are lots of costs and so that they can take up, the rates can be modified to reflect that. So we like to say we work with all those groups, but we don't work for any of those groups. But of course, we will continue our advocacy on behalf of consumers. We will continue to be your champion in a sense of last resort. I will just say at our head table today, just so we can get to the part where we engage your inputs and where we can answer your questions. At the head table today, we have an economist, Dr. Sanadi, who's with us. She would answer a lot of your questions, such as cost of living and those other types of questions. We have a power engineer who's not present with us today, but he is available online. And so if we have questions of those named here, I will try my best to capture him or have somebody get in touch with him so he can provide an answer. That may not be ideal. So in fact, what we may have to do in those situations would be for us to take the questions away and provide them to you. We really apologize for this, but he had to travel at short notice, so he isn't here with us today. We do not answer questions related to the RIC Act on the fly based on advice given to us by senior counsel. And the reason why we've taken that position, we know that sometimes people misquote the Act, when you read a section of the Act in isolation, where things need to be combined with other legal documents. We are able to do that on the fly, so those are also questions we will take from you and respond in due course. Persons will also be aware that we have a long form draft determination, it's 300 pages, and I believe that we may have promised response, comment on that document. You have until March 31st to provide those comments. We encourage you to do so. There's a shorter version, that's 45 pages, and that's also something that I think is worth understanding. But because we understand that some persons may not have the time, may not have all the technical know-how to engage with that, those documents, we actually provide a presentation. And it is my pleasure to introduce our Executive Director, Mr. Glenn Ann, who will make that presentation to provide the context to give you an insight into the thinking that went into coming up with the draft determination, and then we will invite your comments. Thank you very much.
Member of Parliament for Urukos West, Mr. Livingston Tanko, Dr. Alan Sami of the Regional Corporation Pinal David, other councillors or members of the corporations, Mr. David Abdullah, leader of the Movement for Social Justice, and other members. I'll start off by giving you some bits from the Act, which sort of mandates the kind of things that the RIC must focus on in every determination. So, at the top left-hand corner, what you see is something saying that the RIC must be concerned about the ability of consumers to pay rates. That is a major concern, and I want you to stick with that in your head as we go through this exercise. Oh, it's not? Okay. Well, technology will always say. Sorry about that. At the bottom right-hand corner, one of our other major functions is to ensure the financial viability and sustainability of the service providers. In this case, we are talking about T&TEC. Between those two extremes, we have to observe a number and consider a number of things. One of them is the fair and non-discriminatory treatment of customers similarly placed. So if you're a residential customer, no residential customer can be treated differently from another. Similarly for commercial and industrials. We are bound to promote economy and efficiency of services. And that's another point I want you to remember. Because a lot of times when we are talking and we mention the things that we do, I don't know if the message comes across clearly, so I'm asking you to keep that in your mind. Now, until we are also responsible for setting the principles by which rates are determined, and the carry-out periodic reviews every 5 years. This is a periodic review, and it is bound to happen at certain intervals, but the last one expired in 2011, which was called PRE1, and we are going into PRE2 now. Okay? So, some other things from the Act. The RIC must have regard to the funding and ability of the service provider to perform its functions. So we have to ensure that T&TEC has the necessary funds to undertake its function, which is to provide you with reliable service. And we have to be concerned about the ability of people to pay rates. We have to look at replacement capital cost expended, annual depreciation, and a retain on the rate base. Okay. So, as you heard, we started off this process in December 2020 when we issued a document in T&TEC called Information Requirements Business Plan. That document detailed all of the information and data required by the RIC in order to conduct its analysis. At about the same time, we issued something called Framework and Approach to the Second Regulatory Control Period. That is basically outlining how we will go about doing the exercise, which we have completed, mainly. At about that same time, we issued 18 technical documents, and and the chairman referred to those. They went out for public consultation, people responded to them. We didn't have as many responses as we expected. And after reviewing those responses and making adjustments to the document, they were published on our website. They're still on the website, so you can have access to them. But those things, as I said, detailed various aspects of how we would conduct this exercise. So it looked at how we review CapEx, how we look at OpEx, how we determine depreciation expenses, things of that nature. After that, we received the business plan from T&TEC in November 2021. And from that time until September 2022, when the draft rates were produced, we have been engaged in discussion with T&TEC to refine some of the data that they sent us, to get clarification on some of the projects that they wanted to do, and to do our analysis. So we got to the first draft of the prices in September. The board spent a considerable time looking at the issue of affordability and ability of consumers to pay rates. The first draft of the rates are not is not what is presented here, because those rates were higher than what you will see at the later on. So that's what I meant when I said we were concerned about consumers' ability to pay rates and affordability. So when we set the first cut, the board thought this would not work, and they spent some considerable time going over it before we came to what we have and what we'll show you a little later on. So we are at the third stage now, which is what we are doing here. The draft was released in January on the 6th, and we are now talking to you, and we'll do that until March 31st, after which time a final determination will be produced, and there will be a press conference announcing, not on the exact date of this month, some maybe 4 weeks after, announcing what the new rates will be. T&TEC will be provided with the draft determination. They will do the internal assessment in terms of when they should apply these rates, and customers will be advised before the rates are implemented. So, I referred to earlier that we have established methodologies by which we conduct this analysis. We are using something known as an incentive regulation model. Many of you in the audience are familiar with the PUC, Public Utilities Commission. Under the Public Utilities Commission, what they utilized was something known as rate of return regulation. Under that system, the company was guaranteed a rate of return, and the consumer bore all of the risk. Under this model, the company is not guaranteed a rate of return, and all the risk is with the company. That's one of the main distinctions. There are others, but that's one of the main things which should be of interest to the audience. Also, in this model, it's called incentive because we provide a number of the targets in the draft determination for T&TEC to meet. So it's that they have an incentive to meet the target. But in order to meet the target, they have to become more efficient. And I told you that we are concerned about efficiency in the economy. So the target is for them to become more efficient, and if they meet the target, well then they will spend less because the expenditure will be lower because they become more efficient. They will have more revenue to keep, and in the next round, customers will benefit because of the efficiencies gained by T&TEC. So here, this model that we use, the incentive model, uses something called a building block approach to determine the amount of revenue that T&TEC can collect from consumers. So as you can see from what's on the board, we examined efficient operating and maintenance expenditure. We examined CapEx, depreciation, rate of return, and we came to a gross revenue requirement. From that, we took away income which T&TEC earns, but which has nothing to do with the services that they provide. So because it has nothing to do with what they provide, we take that away. And what we allow them to collect from you is only for what services they provide to you. Okay? So here's a picture of what T&TEC's with the fuel and conversion cost aspects, which are the highest in this pictorial. And those are largely out of the control of T&TEC, because you may know that these are long-term contracts with Powergen, Trinity Power, TG. Okay? But the remaining costs of T&TEC over the 5-year period 2023 to 2027, period for which this determination is based on, are basically flat. You will also know that in some cases, T&TEC has recently increased since 2014, but you see a slight decline in the wages and salaries, and that's because some of the things that we did not allow were excessive over time and things like that. So this is why you see the decline in that, because we're trying to ensure that they become more efficient. This is why I'm saying that I'm trying to emphasize this, because I don't want people to go away thinking that we're not trying to get T&TEC to become more efficient. Okay? But at the same time, costs have not remained the same. You saw except for the two top costs, you see everything else was basically flat. But T&TEC's operating costs, these have not remained flat, because many of the items that they use have gone up by significant percentages. The lowest of which is 24% for transformers, and the highest, 114% for street luminaires. So for that 12-year period, 2010 to 2022, these costs have gone up considerably, but T&TEC last had an increase in 2009. I'm sure you could see the mismatch and you know the consequences of that. Okay? So this is just a different pictorial of the cost that I spoke about just now that we reduced. And you can see the largest portion of reduction came from operating expenditure, $1.5 billion. That is our way of telling you T&TEC requested 29.1 million over the 5-year period. The RIC has cut that down to 27.4 billion. So we're going to get to the rates now. How does recovering that impact on the rates? So the existing structure is a 3-tiered structure. We have 1 to 400, 400 to 1,000, over 1,000, and a fixed charge of $6. In the existing structure, the 1 to 400 category is where the RIC has projected that persons who may be considered as pensioners on low incomes, vulnerable groups, that their consumption over a 2-month period will generally average around 400 kilowatt hours. So because of that, and because in the new structure we're proposing monthly rates, we have that amount, so it's now 1 to 200. And we've introduced and expanded at a lower rate tier 2, so that people who are between 1 and 700 kilowatt hours will have a lower cost for a higher consumption of energy. And we have added 2 higher blocks, and those are specifically to encourage conservation and to discourage wastage. Now in setting rates, you have to have objectives, right? So on the one hand, the objective is to ensure citizens can afford electricity. But on the other hand, you have environmental concerns, and you have concerns about conservation. So as the rates go down, that is where those ideas take root. So this is just to give you some comparisons about how we look in relation to other places near to us. You will notice that the average monthly consumption of our residential customers is over 600 kilowatt hours. And the country which is nearest us is Barbados at just about 250 kilowatt hours per month. I'm sure you might be surprised to see Jamaica, a country with a larger population than ours, and some of you have gone there, you see that they have a really good lifestyle, that they don't consume more than compare that to what we offer our citizens as a lifeline, we are still higher than everybody else because we provide more energy to households at a lower rate than anybody else in this sample. Okay. So this is a sample bill of a residential customer who, at the current time, would be using 1254 kilowatt hours bi-monthly. As you see, that person would be paid now 445.48. If you use the same number of kilowatt hours by the proposed rates, that person would be paid 641.43. But if we have that consumption, that person will now be paid 263 per month. Okay. So this is the proposed rate increase for the commercial customers. B1s, the proposal is to move them from 41 cents to 62 cents and to increase the customer charge by $10.35. B2s from 61 cents to 67 cents, and the proposal is to introduce a customer charge of $35. This just gives you an idea of the consumption between 500 kilowatt hours and 5,000. At the lowest level, somebody consuming 500 under the current system would have been paying $232.50. The proposed at the old rates and the same structure would be $380, but at the new structure and proposed rates, $250, somebody would be paying $190. And if you go down, you can just go down to the numbers. For the B2s, well, the average percentage increase is around 10%. So if you were paying, and they already had been on the monthly billing cycle. So monthly, if they were paying for 5,000, 3,050, they would now be paying 3,385. So somebody asked us if we looked at the impact of all of these things on customers. So 90,000 people, just over, currently use between 1 and 200 kilowatt hours per month. Those 90,000 people at the increased rates will only have to pay 20 cents or less per day as an increase. And so I'm going right down to the end. So between 201 and 700, there are 218,000 customers, and they will pay between 21 cents and 144 cents per day as an increase. So when you add that up on your average, 68% of the customers will pay 144 or less per day as an increase for electricity, between 1 and 700 kilowatt hours per month. Now, this is another way we examine if what we have done in terms of rate setting falls within international guidelines for consumption of electricity. The World Bank has a statistic which says that the percentage income of a household for electricity should not be greater than 10%. In our analysis, no one gets close to 10% residential customers. Okay? So we are also setting miscellaneous charges. The last time these were changed was 2006. And we felt, given the lack of time and the increase in cost that was paid by T&TEC to undertake these services, that it was fair to increase the prices, so these have been increased as you see there. So one of the new additions that we're proposing is for new accounts, people are now going to get electricity from T&TEC. If you have made a deposit and you have no issues in paying your bills for 1 year, the deposit will be returned to you. Existing customers do not enjoy that benefit, and they will not enjoy it. But for new customers, if you do not default on your bills for 1 year, you will get back your deposits. So you will ask yourself, and you will ask me, so you're telling me the prices are going to go up, charges are going to go up, how am I going to benefit? And I know that you want to know that. So you're going to benefit because we have introduced in the CapEx expenditure of T&TEC a number of areas that will ensure greater reliability of services. They're going to build some new substations, they're going to improve on some substations, improve on some lines. So those things are going to provide you with greater reliability. We also have set them a target that no customer should receive more than 3 outages per month. Now you might find that 3 outages is a large number, and maybe it is. But compare that to people who have been experiencing 39 outages per month. So this is why we have come to the number of 3 as a standard for them to meet. We have quality of service standards, which they are guaranteed and overall. For the guaranteed standard, if T&TEC fails to meet any of the guaranteed standards, you are entitled to a rebate of $60 on your residential bill and $600 on your commercial and industrial bill. You do not have to do anything. Once the breach has been established, automatic payments will be made, rebates will be made to your bill. We have established some codes of practice for T&TEC, and these are intended to guide T&TEC as to how they should interact with customers who experience their services. And I want to point out only two, because these are the ones that come around here. So, if somebody isn't paying their bill because that person is unable to pay, as opposed to someone who did not pay because they didn't have the time to pay or some other reason. If the person is having problem paying, T&TEC must have policies which will distinguish between people in hardship and those who are delinquent. They must use their internal processes to determine that, and they have to use objective criteria, of course, and they can guide these people about what programs are available to them to ensure they can pay their bills. So one such program is called the Utilities Assistance Program, where $1,200 per annum is provided for persons, but you have to apply for the Ministry of Public Utilities. So another thing I want to identify for you is how T&TEC what should they do when people are experiencing payment difficulties? So when they identify that someone is experiencing payment difficulties, T&TEC must offer on a case-by-case basis alternative payment arrangements consistent with the customer's ability and capacity to pay. Now, I think most people might not know that those things are in place, but they are. They're in the codes of practice, and you should acquaint yourself with them so that if you can tell your neighbor and friend, if you're having this kind of problem, you should go into T&TEC and let them guide you on how these things work. We are also establishing call center metrics, and these are intended to improve the level of response that T&TEC gives when you call them on the phone. So we've been monitoring this. We have set some targets, and they have to meet those targets, but it's really to improve their services in respect of communicating with the public when they call them. So I'll stop there, and I'll leave the floor with you. Thank you.
I'll just say that at the end of each meeting, we do a debrief. We observed what happened, and we make certain changes and adjustments. In fact, I think we can say that we're a learning organization. So we've introduced some additional protocols to improve our questions and answer sessions. And just to remind the participants here that these meetings are primarily really for members of the public, you know, the man in the street who doesn't have an organized forum to pose this question, who doesn't have the benefit of being part maybe of an organized group. So I would say that we're happy to hear from everyone, of course, but as much as possible, if we can let members of the public be given priority so that they can actually ask their questions and that we will continue to engage and inform those persons. I mentioned before, we're running a virtual desk, and from time to time, we're going to take some of those questions or some of those comments and add them to what is being posed here. And just two policies, I just want to remind, as I said earlier, we do not answer questions about the act on the fly. Those are taken away so that we can give them full and proper consideration, and that we can really ensure that we provide the correct information. And by policy, we do not comment on political matters, and we urge persons to pose their questions free of political codes, rhetoric, sloganeering, whatever you choose to call it. Questions that are posed in that way would not be answered by us because we do not want to enter into any political debate with anybody. We are the economic regulators, and that's where we want to, that's the scope in which we want to engage with you today. So, with that said, I also recognize that we have some elected officials. I'm seeing Mr. Parrott in the audience and Mr. Tanku, welcome. And I will open the floor.
Everyone, to members of the head table and to the assembly. Let me establish my bona fides. I'm a ratepayer, renting, of course, an office in the Savannah area. Back on Thursday, I went to pay the T&TEC bills, and we established that bona fides right away. And I've worked all my life in Savannah from 1977 to now. And for those who are not familiar, in the late 1980s, which was the last period of the PUC, I initiated a petition campaign nationally. We garnered 40,000 or more signatories. And in the first hearing of the PUC, there was a sole commissioner, Professor Sarah Ryan. And in my attempt to present the petition at that hearing, the attorney for T&TEC, Ms. Carla, I think her name is, very feisty attorney, decided to engage in an argument with me. And that caused that hearing to be aborted, and it never sat again. So just for the record, I've been involved in the issue of rate increases on behalf of people for very many years, including the last RIC determination. In fact, you may not be aware, Mr. Khan will be aware, that in the last rate increase process, one of the consultations was actually held at the headquarters of the Office Workers Trade Union and was jointly organized because of the role of the OBQ in the electricity industry. So that's just some information as part of organizing that. Let me say, first of all, that there is an issue that must be addressed. If there's to be any sense of fairness, one of your principles was that of fairness. And that is that the government is not just a policy maker. The government is also, and it's not a stakeholder simply, it is also a consumer. In fact, it is one of a very large consumer. And it is also the largest debtor. So according to your own data, of the $1.6 billion owed to T&TEC at the end of 2021, I think it was, 1.3 or more billion dollars was owed by the government and state agencies. If the government therefore doesn't set an example in terms of paying up its debt, what is the sense of asking other people to pay their bills and get disconnected and pay their bills? And more than that, if there's a rate increase, if the government can't pay its debt now, how are they going to pay going forward? Going to put T&TEC in the same invidious cash flow position. Now, the second point I want to make is that in your determination, draft determination, and I read a significant part of it, there is a sentence there, and I didn't know the page number, that I was finding later. where you said that you have to take into consideration government policy. No, you didn't say that you'll be dictated by government policy, but you have to take into consideration government policy. Now that therefore means in effect that government policy can trump all the technical economic work that you do. So all those things about the building block process and all of your challenges about T&TEC's costing, etc., 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 can ultimately be trumped by government policy. And therefore the issue is not just technical in terms of the rate proposed increase, but it is also one of political economy. I want to make that point very, very clear. The second point I want to make is that one of the preliminary documents which you published some time before was on the issue of timely price reviews. And you very correctly said that where there's a delay, ultimately that could lead to increased costs because you have to catch up the costs that price rises to the service provider. But nowhere did you, except for one line saying that there was some question about whether the RIC could have proceeded with the rate increase and so on in the absence of subsidiary legislation. Nothing more was said. So what is being told to the country now is that householders, citizens, have to pay for that 12-year gap between the last rate review and this one. And that is not fair, that cannot be fair, that we are having to pay for that 12-year gap when it should have been every 5 years. And that needs to be addressed. Ordinary people are being penalized for that. The third point I want to make is that the power purchase agreement, because the country has not been focused, and that is why I want to speak a while about this issue of the power purchase agreement, because I was very involved in 1994 when the then Banning government decided to partly privatize T&TEC. Many people in this room, perhaps young, don't remember that T&TEC used to be the sole generator, quite apart from transmitter and distributor of electricity. So there was a T&TEC power station, B power station, there was Penal combined cycle power station, and then in the 70s, with the expansion of oil and gas prices and so on, and because of the setting up of Point Lisas, there was a Point Lisas power station. And all of that was T&TEC. But here what happened? The government decided to sell 49% of T&TEC's assets, which would have been valued at over 5 billion TT dollars at that time, for some 600 million TT dollars. That is what Amoco Business Development and SEI, Southern Electric Industries, paid for 49% of of T&TEC's generating assets, which became power gen. The government's argument was that we needed to build new power stations and put in new power plants generating electricity. Not a single new power plant was established by Power Gen from 1994 to now. Not a single one. So there was a lie told to the country to sell and justify the privatization partially of generation in this country. Just as the government sold a lie about why the refinery should be shut down. But that's another story. They like to tell lies to justify things. But the reality was that there was a World Bank loan which mandated some privatization. Even though when the ONU put in its proposals countering that, Professor Ken Julian, who was the architect of the expansion of generating capacity in the country, blah, 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 Energy Czar, and so on, he said that ONU's proposal made, quote, good economic and technical sense. But that good economic and technical sense was ignored, and the $107 million US which SEI and local business development company brought to buy power gen, where 49% of the generating assets. Not a single cent went into new generating capacity. Most of it went to the government, so the government could pay off whatever debts that they had. And from then to now, we have been saddled with this model of power purchase agreements. I can go into more detail because Amoco was the biggest gas producer, but Amoco bought part of the generating capacity, so they were getting a cut both ways, and so on and so on. So, the power purchase agreements have saddled T&TEC with that 50% cost, operating cost of T&TEC, or 50%, just maybe just not depending on the fuel costs and so on, goes to the power purchase through agreements to the generators of electricity. But what does that mean? In effect, that means that T&TEC buys natural gas, gives the natural gas to the power producer, which then produces electricity and sells it back to T&TEC. And so it is like you buying the cloth and giving it to the tailor, and the tailor making the suit for you and giving it back to you and so on, rather than the tailor supplying the cloth himself or herself. Now, more than that, the power purchase agreement specify that T&TEC must buy a certain quantity of electricity, regardless of whether the demand for the electricity is there. So T&TEC is buying electricity for which it does not have revenue coming back because it can't sell the electricity. Those power purchase agreements are meant to enable the power purchase producers to make a profit. What does that mean? It means therefore that built into the electricity cost to the consumer is the profit of the generators. And if that profit was removed, then the cost of electricity to the consumer will also go down. And the RIC has to speak to that. Why do I say that? Because in the act, unless my act is outdated, the Schedule 1, I think it is, of service providers includes the power producers, am I right? So therefore, the RIC can address the issue of the power purchase agreements and so on. Must address that question. That is the elephant in the room. And I want to say that apart from the OBQ, the only people who are raising this issue of the power purchase agreements and what that means for the final cost of electricity is the MSJ. We said so in a press conference on the 22nd of January of this year. That is the elephant in the room which we must address. If we don't address that, then the power purchase agreements will continue to go on and make money. I'm just going to make one more point. Well, two more quick points. One is that one of the problems that T&TEC has today, 2023, and has had since 2019, is that it lost its industrial users, its biggest industrial customers. ArcelorMittal was shut down in 2015, 2016. But the biggest single user of electricity in the country was ArcelorMittal. Second biggest user was probably the petrochemical refinery shut down in 2018. With gas supplies in the country down, LNG train 1 and the ammonia methanol plants in Port Neches have been running at less than 100% capacity, which means less electricity has been consumed. And therefore, according to your own data, which, and I congratulate the RIC for making all of the data available. It is voluminous and it's difficult to read, so the other person can't read it, which is why I'm speaking to it now. That between 2015 and 2021, industrial users' sales declined from 49% of total sales of by T&TEC to 33%, a decline of 16%. And as a result, industrial users' contribution to T&TEC declined, while households increased their contribution to revenue by 13%, so that the burden of revenue generation by T&TEC has shifted from the industrial users to the householders. So Peter now is being asked to pay for Paul. Ordinary people are being asked to make up the revenue loss that was of no fault of theirs, but the government closed down the refinery, and therefore that didn't have to happen. Successive governments failed to deal with the natural gas supply, and so that's not the fault of citizens. And the government could have stepped in and dealt with the closure of ArcelorMittal as well, although we know ArcelorMittal was trying to push for lower electricity rates or water rates, which of course we disagree with. So, there's also another issue with respect to what decisions were made, and that is that TG would be based way down in Gray, which is now the largest single supplier in terms of generator electricity. means that I'm not an engineer. We'd like to know what are the increased systems losses as a result of the closure of Port of Spain B power station. Now having to transmit power all the way from that way, all the way up north. And one of the problems with that, associated with that, is that if, as there was twice within the last year and a half, a major problem with transmission, for whatever reason, coming out of TGU, it shut down the whole country because there was no generating capacity north of the Caribbean River. The issue of coming back to the power purchase agreement, in your draft determination, Chair, you simply stated that conversion and fuel costs are considered uncontrollable costs. That is cost over which the actions of the utility have no effect. We cannot accept that. Can't simply accept it and say, well, that is our fate and it must be so, and let poor people pay for that. That cannot be so. Last thing I want to say is that what is being asked here is, as small as you may say, 21 cents a day or whatever it is, executive director, the fact of the matter is that policies like this, and I heard, this is not, you can't respond to what the minister said, but then he's engaged in policy and you have to hear what the policy is. He said 2 days ago, oh, we're going to get cards for the most vulnerable. We have a system in this country where successive governments use cards, food card, this card, that card, to help the so-called vulnerable. But it creates two things. One, dependence. But nobody asks the question, why do we have so many vulnerable people in the first place? This country ought not to have so many vulnerable people, but the political parties like it so, as well. So we should have to increase election rates and implement other policies which make more people vulnerable, more people see trouble. You yourself said that in your determination. People are complaining about being hungry and middle class can't survive. That is in your determination. So we happy with that, and then increase electricity rates to make the situation worse. Water rates will be increased, make the situation worse. Transportation costs make the situation worse. All kind of other policies send workers home, retrench workers, no wage increase of 4% over 6 years, make the situation worse and worse and worse. And then what do? Give them a card on the other hand. No, that's wrong. And we oppose that type of neoliberal policy approach. Finally, I want to warn citizens of this country that in their critique of T&TEC and T&TEC's service delivery, not to seek to demonize the workers who are employed by T&TEC, because I am well aware that there are people in this country, when they demonize the workers, they set up a justification for retrenchment, for privatization, and for busting unions. And I warn people that this process must not be allowed to end in that outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jula.
Right.
Comments?
Approximately 3 years ago, 6 T&TEC trucks, 6 express, came to change a light pole.
May I have your name, please? Your name?
They came to change a light pole on Petra Avenue.
Okay, sir. The process we have a number of comments on the floor right now from Mr. Abdullah. We want to comment on some of them, and then we'll take other person's comments and answer them. Yes? If you can hold on a minute, we want to address Mr. Abdullah's questions or statements. All right, thank you very much. I think there's some that I can answer immediately for you, Mr. Abdullah, and of course the other persons on the head table. I also had that question about the impact of closing Port of Spain, and T&TEC has provided information to show that closing Port of Spain actually reduced the heat rate, because Port of Spain was a fairly inefficient plant, so the heat rate has reduced. I've also asked them about the distance from TGU to where other people are consuming electricity, and I think it has added maybe 1% 1%, they sell to the technical losses, and they intend to put some generation or some sort of equipment in Port of Spain that will assist with that. And so that's something that I can answer for you. I do share your concern about the demonization of the T&TEC employees. In fact, of course I don't work for T&TEC, but we are aware of the work they do. And maybe it's not known that T&TEC employees actually do provide a very good service to the country. And I have heard people speaking about the inefficiencies and so, which I don't share that view. I'm very happy that you've put that in the public domain, and maybe some of the comments would be more informed. You asked, I think maybe I would say maybe the real large question you've asked concerns the PPA. We've done some analysis, and I would admit that further analysis is required around the PPA. But in 2021, the General Manager of T&TEC actually had a long discourse in terms of the capacity that's installed, how it's utilized, and so on. And he was really dealing with the departure of ArcelorMittal as well in that. And at the end of his assessment, he says, that he has to pay something like $250 million a year in capacity that he can't use immediately. So in doing this analysis, we have gotten some information from him that we've put in a forecast. And I would just say to people who forecast data, that data does not always hold out, but we did take the trouble to ask about that. So he has given us some information that someone is interested in coming and operating the at least part of the plant there. So ArcelorMittal used to use something like 200 megawatts, and this person would probably be taking maybe 150 megawatts or so. I mean, we can clarify this. Okay. So that is an opportunity in terms of what would reduce that additional expenditure. And in addition, when we did the residential rates, we've actually taken that 250 amount and we have doubled it, and we've taken those numbers out of the residential rates because we do agree that there was a long duration between the rates. We agree that these rates are coming after COVID. We agree that maybe T&TEC has a commercial arrangement, which they have also said in that same meeting that they've gone back to their providers and they're not able to renegotiate those contracts. But we share the view that to some extent possibly, we had to mitigate the impact of that on the consumers. We are going to do some more in-depth analysis with them. We have sent someone in there to collect that data. And before the end of this entire rate determination, I think we will have a really good number that we can utilize, including approaching the government as a stakeholder to determine how that amount should be dealt with. I don't know some other points, maybe other persons speak up.
Yeah. So in relation to the point you made about the largest customers coming off the system and the impact that had, that is something no one can deny. However, what is probably not known is that residential customers account for 45.4% of the cost of T&TEC, while at that time, industrials were only 37.9%. So the residential customers are the ones who impose the biggest cost on T&TEC, not the industrial. And that's largely because, as you would know, the industrials are served sometimes directly through transmission, there is no distribution. So that reduces the cost. So that's what should be done. The residential impose the largest cost on the T&TEC as opposed to any other category of customers. In relation to the government policy issue, when we say we have to follow government policy, we're talking about in terms of things like the structure. So as you know, a 112 megawatt renewable energy plant is coming on. That will be part of the demand, and we have to follow through with that now to set rates based on those things. So the policy comes before the regulation. So it is in that context we're talking about following policy. any other specific?
Alright, can you have your name, please, sir?
Yes. About 3 years ago, month of August, 6 T&TEC trucks came to change a light pole. That change was successful. But you know what? They left 2 old poles in the drain on Petra Avenue. That's the first complaint. The second complaint, nearly every night, there's one transformer that controls the area. The current goes. Nearly every night, and this for years now, that current is going. Thirdly, there are 2 light bulbs above and Wasa pump station by scaffolding. Just on scaffolding is compound. And those 2 light bulbs in the last 3 months have not been changed. You cannot expect to raise the fee. It's a T&TEC monthly or by monthly fee if the service is not good. Right now, the service is not good. Thank you.
I think a lot of the questions you have, those are really questions about T&TEC's operations, and we will pose them to T&TEC so that they can address them. But I just want to say 2 things regarding maybe this, I think might be street lights you're speaking about, and that's an area that we have observed when we do the monitoring of T&TEC, and that's an area we would say for improvement, that we really need to improve in that area. In addition, I would also say that part of the reason that persons may not be getting the service they want and expect is because of T&TEC rates. Those rates have been the same for 12 years. You would have seen that a lot of their costs have gone up, and I think we are in a situation where we have to do sort of a both, and we have to give them a little more money so that they can provide the service that our citizens expect and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Sami. I'm here as a citizen. I also happen to be the chairman of the Vistabella Regional Corporation and former deputy mayor of San Fernando. Is your data 10 years old, your consumer data? Is it 10 years old? Because I'll tell you why. Since that time, I don't know if you have measured the loss of jobs, for example, the cost of a food basket, the cost of gas, the cost of transport, the collapse of businesses, the introduction or the soon introduction or reintroduction of property tax. Penal Levy, for example, has 90,000 citizens or people and 20,000 residents other than Penal-born people or people who have chosen to live in Penal. So we have 110,000 people, of which there are about 25,000 households. I want to point out that many of these communities have asked me to ask you that we are actually suffering a kind of poverty never before experienced. I'll give you the examples there, and they are concrete examples. When we distribute hampers, we give over 1,000 hampers. We know who they give them to. We know where they are living. So we have been able to map it, and I do have a poverty map based on hampers. I have a map also based on flooding incidentally. And we have found, for example, that a number of our houses don't even have pipe-borne water. 612 we deliver water to. We have delivered 1.68 million gallons of water already for this dry season to 612 homes. 1.68 million over 35 days, working days. I say this to point out that people are under severe stress. There's been severe loss of jobs. It is estimated there were 2,000 small businesses in Penal Day, and at least 1,000 have collapsed or in a pre-collapse stage. It means, therefore, this leads to unemployment. So they've asked me, and our estimate of the poor, by the way, is estimated between 13 and 19%, and that data is generated from councillors who will bring data in. And up to 27% are living without any surpluses at the end of the month. So there is no money for investment. You cannot buy anything extra for your household. And these people now are going to be imposed with a new tax, which in addition to the property tax that is going to be introduced soon, or reintroduced, plus the cost of food, the cost of transport and so on, is certainly going to severely cut their standard of living. A lot of these families are also complaining that they're going to suffer they're going to suffer educationally, their health care will suffer, the small business costs will go up because of the cost of electricity, and that therefore, generally speaking, everything will rise while their salaries remain the same or the salaries are non-existent. So I have two questions to pose. How tied in is the price of natural gas to your proposed rate increase? Now, my colleague David raised several of these questions. I will repeat his questions. Is there a built-in provision for inflation in what is proposed by you? 2. What initiatives are the RIC proposing to T&TEC as an alternative for new sources of energy? Solar, for example, wind, wave energy, thermal energy, or is T&TEC, or you have nothing to do with that? And finally, what is the turnaround time in any T&TEC building at this time? I am hearing that there are going to be provisions for all kinds of exceptions. I want you to understand if there's a T&TEC rates, there's going to be a greater burden on transfers and subsidies to the state, because a larger percentage is now going into these supports, these social supports. So more people now, as it is, are asking for food cards. More people are asking for relief from floods. There are people in Penal who have not got flood relief since 2018, and there have been 6 more floods, and many of them are not got their relief. So there are more and more social supports are going to result because of this proposed T&TEC rate. Now, I have several more, but I'm aware my colleagues are behind me. I'm telling you, I'm representing the citizens of the 33 communities in the Penal region, and they've asked me to ask these among several other questions. I will leave my handwritten questions. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sam, you'll be pleased to know that you don't only, you're allowed to ask more than 3 questions, but we've just asked for them 3 at a time, so we can hear from as many persons as possible, but you're free to return later. I think maybe we can ask Dr. Spivey to discuss some of the comments around cost of living, inflation, impact on the citizens. And that there's probably one other with regard to the new sources of energy that we will return to later. Ms. Landy, please.
In terms of the data with regard to customers and affordability, now the Central Statistical Office provided the latest data, and yes, it is dated. So to come to basically understand, and I mean, I think we're all in society, we know that things have become a lot more difficult for most citizens coming out of COVID. Again, freight charges have increased over time in the Russian-Ukraine war, and because of those issues, the consideration by the RIC to have the possible to understand that there may be a possibility that average incomes, which was at that point in time $6,000, would possibly be a lot much lower. That has been considered, and it is considerably one of the major points that is being brought out in this forum. But one of the things as regulators, and I think Mr. Khan mentioned it, is that in terms of looking at what will really be considered by the World Bank and other international organizations as the standing for affordability of rate payment. And with the utility rates, it is 10% of someone's income. So given that it's 10% of someone's income, at the first tier, which is between the 0 to 200 kilowatt hour, with the bill, somebody will have a bill of $46.44. And that means that if you take 10% of someone's income, that's looking at somebody who has an income of $460 a month. So someone with a bill of $460 a month, pay 10% of their income will be 4644, which means that that person is basically in the first tier. And the second tier, which is the 201 to 700 kilowatt hour usage, that value in terms of the bill is $296.44. Again, meaning if that's 10% of someone's income, that's going to be $2,960.64.40. And again, looking at it like that, there is obviously the balancing of interest, right? Looking at customers' ability to pay, but also looking at balancing the fact that the RIC also has to be responsible for T&TEC recovering efficient costs to provide services. So looking at affordability at one level versus obviously ensuring that citizens can actually have a reliable service. Given that limitation to the remit of a utility regulator, any other shortfalls that may come because of greater hardship in the economy will have to come from fiscal policy and the agencies that will be able to do so.
So I think Dr. Sammy asked something about whether the RIC made any recommendations on other types of energy. So the issue of the kind of energy is a sector policy which is within the government. So anything to do with changing the energy mix, is something that will be determined by the government in the direction that they want to go regarding the industry. So that the RIC will then operate under that policy in terms of the kinds of rates it sets. But anything to do with the change of the structure of the sector, that has to come from government policy.
I can also provide them with the information that T&TEC actually is adding utility scale solar power to the mix. There's a contract that was signed in December with BP Light Source, Shell and BP to do that. And that generation, that construction is meant to start next quarter. And then for that power to be delivered towards the end of 2024. So some of that power will be put in the mix. And the benefit of that, of going to renewables for the country, is that it will free up some of the gas, and that gas can be sold on the market at the full price compared to what is happening now, where the gas is really subsidized, maybe about a 25% subsidy by the government. As well, there is a feed-in tariff policy, and feed-in tariff is also associated with what they call distributed solar energy, and that's the type of equipment that persons have seen in other places where there is solar cells and so on the rooftop. Some of it you consume, some of it that's then sold back to the electricity system. T&TEC also has indicated that they are studying wind power, and there is the thought that wind power from our engineer, who unfortunately isn't here today, who has said that his preference is really for wind power because you can get more from the equipment. Solar you only have when the sun is up, but wind power you can have night and day. So that is under active consideration from T&TEC. And if they really go in that direction, it's going to be beneficial for us, maybe not directly in seeing it in the rates, because of the fact that the gas is subsidized, our end price of electricity is fairly low. But the benefit would be that that money will now be freed up to be sold internationally and available through government, the old government direct revenue or through taxes of NGC. Right? Thank you. Can I have the next person?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naresh Raghunandan. Unlike two of the previous speakers, I don't have a constituent following that justifies my standing here. However, I was given permission by two young ladies to speak freely on their behalf. And seeing that the government through the RIC didn't see it fit to bring our consultation a little bit closer to the 110,000 people in the region, I thought it important to represent them here today. The first person goes by the name of Sandy Lalma, my paternal grandmother, who is a pensioner, who is the sole income of a household, where the other resident of the household is a widow without an income. The second person on whose permission I stand to speak goes by the name of Polly Ramna, who is my maternal grandmother, who is the sole income earner, in a household. Both of whom are pensioners. Fixed income, large medical bills, and a household to run. Words carry a certain level of power. And in the presentation that the RIC has so eloquently and very professionally put forward this afternoon, I have picked up on a few things that my constituents, those two young ladies, will have an issue with. First of all, Mr. Khan, Executive Director, during your presentation, one of your lines was, the population through its normal courses, through the media, whatever, will be advised of what the new rates will be. In my humble, maybe ignorant view, a consultation is where it's not a fait accompli, where the decisions have not been made and the opinions and the suggestions that are coming forward can actually make an impact on the final decision. So is it that, one of my questions, is it that the consultation to which we've all come this afternoon, is a effort of futility if the decision of the RIC has already been made? During the presentation, again, the Executive Director, and I do appreciate it, made efforts to identify the breakdown of how the rate increases will go, and the separation for the lowest users, assumed to be the lower income earners, and how their increases will be the smallest on the residential side. And we are speaking about quite significant increases on the commercial side. Now, my maternal grandmother visits a doctor twice for the month. That doctor pays a commercial rate for the electricity in his office. As much as he is an excellent physician, I don't consider him to be a philanthropist to absorb that additional cost and not pass it on to his patients. The grocery that provides them with their food runs electricity 24/7. They will not be paying a higher commercial rate. I don't know any grocery owner that is a philanthropist and will run a charity to the detriment of his business. So, whilst you all would have had certain suggestions with cards and stuff like that, we all know how easy it is to get inter-government social program, right? And how easy the form filling is and how helpful the workers are when you go, especially for these people who can't read and can't write. I spent 4 hours in the social welfare in Siparia trying to renew Sandy Lalman's life certificate for her pension. So go with God when it comes to that card. When all the focus is placed on the lower side of it, which is the residential rate, when the commercial rate increases come, and that trickles down to higher food prices, higher medical bills, higher transport costs, higher everything else, where are these persons in the fixed income bracket who have no choice but to take what is given to them? How are they going to survive? So my second question to you is, what consideration have been given, if any, in your deliberation for the impact on the commercial increases on residential persons of the lower income? Again, words matter. Just as a point of question, and the economist can correct me, I am no financial expert by any measure. In one of the slides, I think it was slide 4, where we were discussing the needs for T&TEC, the financial needs, I noticed that depreciation was part of a line item there. I stand to be corrected, but isn't depreciation a non-financial cost? So I'm not too sure how it would have been added in as a financial measure or projection for T&TEC. That's not one of my questions. That is a point of inquiry. In your response to Mr. Abdullah, Madam Chairperson, you would have identified that you agreed with him with the PPA and the fact that it needed further analysis.